You said this means that anybody can receive salvation, but this ain't about salvation.
Well,
Even if you start at verse 1. In verse 1, it says, "Brethren, if a man be overtaken in a fault, ye which are spiritual, restore such a one in the spirit of meekness, considering thyself, lest thou also be tempted." That's the subject. There is nothing about salvation in the subject.
well, here's the thing. I could have a narrative. I could be talking about any specific type of story, and within that story, I could say that gravity is the force that holds everything together.
So let me give you an example. Like
So even though,
as you saying, what a man whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he reap. Like I know that you're golden swords. Like
well,
you sowed that into your voice. Like you try to change it up and switch it up, but I know that that's golden swords. So now you can reap being able to have an intelligent conversation, or you can reap being an idiot.
and you can reap sowing to the spirit and receive salvation, because every man
You
reaps what he
cannot.
sows.
So you
Verse
have to
8,
show me. Wait,
verse
wait, but
8 can't contradict verse 7, sir.
you're
It's
you're,
no way out
abso-
of it.
you're absolutely correct.
Okay,
I
so
never
I'm
said
right
one
then.
second. One second.
You got
I never
destroyed,
said
sir.
you got to be quiet for a second. I never said verse 7 contradicts verse 8. That's not what I said. That never came out of my mouth. What you tried to do was input salvation into the text when the subject itself is not salvation. And this is what Christian lunatic nuts do. What they do is they're so obsessed with trying to counter the Israelites that believe that salvation is only for Israel. They'll take any verse in the Bible, and if it's something where a man can do anything, they make it about salvation. When this is simply, if a man is overtaken in a fault, if a man has an issue, you restore that. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to read verses 1 through 6 before we get to 7, so that people can get the context. So now it says, if a man be overtaken in a fault, ye which are spiritual, restore such a one in the spirit of meekness, considering thyself, lest thou also be tempted. So just like you could be tempted and might fall, you see a brother that's in a fault, you restore him in the spirit of meekness. And don't nobody ever mistake meekness for talking like a sissy. That's not what it's talking about. But it's talking about having a sense of humility. You don't want to beat the brother down. Verse 2, bear ye one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. Now we're talking about law. We still ain't got nothing about salvation yet. For if a man think himself to be something when he is nothing, he deceiveth himself. But let every man prove his own work, that when he shall have rejoicing in himself alone and not another. For every man shall bear his own burden. Still not talking about salvation. Verse 6, let him that is taught in the word communicate unto him that teacheth in all good things. Verse 7, be not deceived, God is not mocked. For whatsoever a man soweth, that he shall also reap. So you have to show me where in what we just read is it talking about salvation. I'm waiting.
Okay, sir, the verses that you read were not specifically talking about accepting Christ in your heart. It was more so talking about helping your brothers when they fall. The chapter is talking about a variety of things. You can have chapters in the Bible, sir, that touch on different topics, but you're making it seem like the entire chapter has to be talking specifically about salvation in order for my point to be true, which is a straw man argument, sir.
That's not what
And
I
that's
said.
why you didn't. Sorry, I'm still talking, sir. I didn't
That's
speak
not
while
what
you
I
were
said.
speaking,
You can't, but I
but
don't
I'm
want you to
explaining what you did,
misrepresent me.
sir.
I
I'm
did not
explaining
do
what you
anything
did,
but
sir. You
show.
did do that, sir.
You said that the
And
chapter
why didn't
is
you read
talking
verse
about.
8, sir?
You said
Why
the
didn't you read
chapter
verse
is
8?
talking. You said the
Why did you
chapter
stop at
is talking.
7 and didn't read verse
Stop
8,
talking for
sir?
a second. Stop talking. You
He's
said
getting
the
cut,
chapter.
everyone.
You said the chapter is talking about a variety of things. We haven't even got past verse 8. You inputted salvation into verse 8, and we're not, and that's you straw manning, making it about salvation, which is why when I read, and I only said I was reading verses 1 through 6. I read verse 7 as a favor. But when we read those verses, there's nothing about salvation in those verses at all. Now, if we read past verse 8, and let's say if it starts talking about something else, you got on this stage and said you wanted to read Galatians 6, 7, verse 8, and imputed salvation into verse 8, and that was a lie.
Sir, it wasn't a lie.
And
Sir, the
show me in
entire
those first 8 verses, I'm a mute. Show
okay.
me in those first 8 verses that the subject is salvation for other nations. You have
Okay, sir, that's very silly. You're asking a man to show you something in verses that he didn't initially read.
no problem. I'll remix the question.
I
In
read
verses
verses.
7, I'm gonna remix the question. In verses 7 and 8 that you did read, show where it's talking about salvation for all nations.
Okay, in the verses that I read, it's talking about an individual man. Individual man. It's not talking about nations, it's talking about an individual. Because when you read it, it clearly says, for he is a singular, he is a singular pronoun, sir. That's not an entire nation. It says that for he that soweth to his flesh, his is a possessive singular pronoun, sir. For he that soweth to his flesh shall of the flesh reap corruption. But he that soweth to the Spirit shall of the Spirit reap life everlasting. And we know that verse 8 cannot contradict verse 7, which says, for whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. So if a man soweth to the Spirit, of the Spirit shall he reap life everlasting. One cannot cancel out the other, sir. So, sir, you just got to accept it and stop trying to fight against it, sir. It's not going to help you. You may as well just accept that this is a universal law that cannot be broken because what a man soweth, he shall reap. Verse 8, as I stated, cannot contradict verse 7, sir. That's the cut, sir, in ISUPA language. That's a cut, sir.
Nigga said ISUPA. Nigga can't even don't even got the
I
acronym.
said ISUPK
You
language,
said
sir.
A, nigga. So now, with all that you just spewed out, you still never showed how this is talking about salvation for other nations. This ain't
I
even
never
talking
said
about
I'm
you.
talking
You
about the
said
individual.
no. You said that any man can receive salvation.
Exactly.
When you make that statement, you're not talking about any Israelite man. You're talking about a Chinese man, an African man, a white man. You're talking about all that. And that's not what this subject is, brother. Like, and Golden, you ain't got to change. Talk regular. Ain't nobody scared of your voice.
So,
You,
sir,
the only person scared of your voice and face is you. That's why you won't show yourself on here. And when he do show
sir,
himself, he puts a bandana over his face so you can't see his mouth.